Surviving an Arkfall is easy if you have friends. But to really live, you have to find a place to make a difference.
Hello to everyone who's not deaf. You're watching another review. Last time we covered a fantasy MMO trying to carve a name for itself in a field of hundreds with Neverwinter. This time around, we're covering an MMO that is looking to help jumpstart a subgenre that has struggled to really make itself legitimate to this point. Defiance from Tryon Worlds looks to take a dip in the murky MMO shooter waters with a few interesting gimmicks in its arsenal. Other than PlanetSide 2, the MMO shooter market has been a failure both economically as well as simply producing decent games. PlanetSide 2 finally proved to the world that you can make a game that rivals the quality seen in the top-notch multiplayer shooters and turn it into a massively multiplayer game without any technical deficiencies in terms of performance. So we can all only hope that Sony's early success bleeds over into other titles to follow in the game's footsteps, as more and more developers try to traverse the MMO first and third person shooter spheres. But to overshadow what Defiance is trying to do by comparing it to other games would be a mistake. It isn't simply trying its hand in a dangerously unproven market, it is doing so while attempting to make the connection between television and gaming as well. For the first time, a massively multiplayer game is going to lay its story out alongside a television series which will air on the Sci-Fi Network. The show will naturally have a huge influence on the game, but more importantly, what happens in the game will have an effect on the show as well. Depending on how players decide to do certain things and certain quests in-game will mean that the show will change accordingly. As for how heavily the show will change, or how important these changes will truly be to the primary overarching story isn't clear yet. We won't know that until April when the TV show hits Sci-Fi on the 15th and the game launches earlier that month on the 2nd. But is the game any good? After putting ample time into a few other offerings for the genre such as Firefall among others, I have to say that at the very least it's better. And as a game in general, it does a lot of things right. It offers the players a slew of PvE content for one. There are quests absolutely everywhere in this game. They are all easy to do and find, and they are modeled for a game that wants you to shoot people in the face. In addition, the diversity that the mission types offer is also very high. You have everything from your run-of-the-mill kill these mutants while your partner does some important thumb twiddling, to the other side of the spectrum where you find time trials that allow you to race through waypoints on your ATV and try for the best time, not only gaining rewards based on your bronze, silver, or gold medal finishes, but also competing against other players on a leaderboard. The competitive PvE doesn't stop there, as you will frequently find missions throughout the world that offer you the challenge of using a certain gun in a certain area strewn with certain bad guys and ask you to get the highest score that you can by slaughtering them all. While I had a hard time understanding how players at the top of the leaderboard got 2 million points while I struggled for 10,000, I still felt it was a great touch to the game. The content is certainly present. Where a lot of these games fall short is making the assumption that only adding guns and a Twitch-based skill system is going to be enough to keep people around. They are, of course, very wrong. Why would I play a watered-down MMO version of a shooter online when I could just play a non-MMO version of it that isn't soggy and depressing? That's what developers don't understand though. You have to build an MMO like an MMO. The last 3 letters of your genre's acronym don't matter as much as you think. Whether it's RPG, FPS, or TPS, you have to give people content to work through no matter how good your PvP aspect of your game may or may not be, delusions of grandeur aside. At the very least, Defiance has managed to overcome the typical hurdle. And I found that adding some slight physics to your vehicle goes a long way, as I Evel Knieveled my way over people's heads and stole kills as I sped down highways, gaining XP by rolling over those unfortunate enough to be mutated. In the bad way, not the X-Men way. As for the story that accompanies these quests, I think that it is a pending issue that won't be answered completely until we see how the TV show and game work together. Naturally, when your story is tied to a film or television show, that lore is your fuel, and potentially your bottleneck as well. I can honestly say that the story is at the very least there and accounted for. and it isn't a dormant beast that you only see every once in a while in a cinematic, and you only get whiffs of it every once in a while from there on out. With voice acting heavy story quests given to the player more than frequently, the story is definitely paramount, and I would be worried if it wasn't. After all, how can you expect a TV show and video game crossover to work when one half is doing all of the heavy lifting? I personally enjoy the story, though I don't completely understand it. I do think any confusion about what is going on in this kind of post-apocalyptic future, maybe version of Earth, will become clearer the closer we come to launch, and any questions of what the hell is going on will be answered when the show and its sibling game are running on all cylinders alongside one another. That said, while most of the game definitely avoids a lot of the typical pitfalls that the MMO shooters before it have fallen into, it subtly trips and falls over others. The game offers an improvement in terms of gunplay over a lot of the other games before it. This is very, very true. It's definitely not as painful as Fallen Earth or the more, well, Korean offerings into the genre. It doesn't exactly offer the most weighty combat that I've ever come across, however. If Firefall does one thing right, and it may be the only thing it does right, it makes you feel like your weapons are tearing through millions of bugs, and more bugs, and maybe some more bugs that you will end up killing. Defiance offers a lot of great combat experiences in terms of missions and setups and so forth. You will definitely have your adrenaline pumping on a few of the early story missions when you're fending off waves of gun-toting mutants while your NPC fixes, well, something. I don't really know what she was fixing. I was too busy killing off things and honestly staring at her butt cleavage. Yes, they actually gave her model butt cleavage. It's seriously just amazing. And it does a few things right, not the butt cleavage, but the game, such as making headshots critical hits and many times instant deaths, but I want to feel like I'm playing a real shooter, a top-notch AAA FPS or third-person shooter game, a game where my guns are lethal and I'm a badass. A developer should want me to stop saying a real shooter when I'm comparing their game to other games. That said, despite the meh gunplay itself, the PvP is actually very strong. The Shadow War mode in general is very cool in the way that it simply turns whatever area of the map you're in into a battleground with capture points. And while certain guns seem completely and obviously overpowered, I never felt like I couldn't get a kill despite being very low in level rating. Another thing I noticed was how static the world felt. There are Arcfall events, of course, the quote-unquote dynamic events that are essentially the rifts of Defiance, and the world itself has a lot of character. It has a lot of burnout buildings and interesting wreckages and scenery to take in, but the inhabitants that should be the blood coursing through the veins are stagnant. Something that hit me surprisingly heavily when I was playing was the complete lack of doors. If it was a building you were meant to go into, it was either a building without a door or a building with a very obvious stack of crates that are meant to be used as stairs to the building's roof. I was completely taken aback when I found a ladder and I actually interacted with it. It was a surprise to see this after waiting through building after building with non-functioning doors, non-functioning anything for that matter. However, the world is very nice to look at. The graphics aren't amazing, they certainly could be a lot better, but I think the world shines in what is otherwise mediocrely rendered. This is an understandable issue if you take into account that the game will be launched on PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. You can imagine how many more issues an MMO has opposed to the launch it and leave it standard genre games. Then you can only guess at how that number exponentially expands when you add 2 additional consoles into the mix. If you at least take the graphics back a notch, that might help you maintain the game more easily. I will iterate again that the game doesn't look awful, just not great. The fact that this game is going to be on the consoles as well as the computers also provides another kink, and that is the controls. While the UI is strong in terms of visual and theory, I think that it falls short in terms of actually providing you control of your game, at least on computer. I could definitely see how some of the control options that they've chosen definitely go well with the controller. However, as a PC gamer, I was left a little bit disappointed in how hard it was to complete basic tasks involving the user interface and various menus. Defiance has something to it. There is a depth to the game that a lot of its predecessors simply don't have. At least not to this point in the MMO, TPS/FPS genre's brief history. It could have done a lot of things differently and turned out better if it had a little more confidence in its audience. Where it suffers are the points where the developers dumb the game down, a mistake that most developers make. And why not? Why not dumb down your game when you can see what games like Call of Duty have accomplished by doing just that? You have to assume that a lot of those decisions are made because of the fact that undeniably there will be players who are only playing the game because of the TV show. That is definitely very true. People who wouldn't be playing an MMO or a shooter separately are going to be playing the combination of the two because they're a fan of a campy science fiction just like the rest of us. At the end of the day, this game has to stand on its own as a game. Even if the show is amazing, if the game is simply bad, then nobody is going to continue to play it, even the Defiance sci-fi mega fans. The Defiance game certainly has the potential to be a second half of the Defiance anchor. If Sci-Fi can make a show as bad as Lost Girl popular, then they certainly have their clutches on a very special market that many have struggled to get their fingers into: the blindly devoted geek and nerd group. The group is often misunderstood and thus elusive for many developers for any facet, whether it's TV, film, or gaming. Sci-Fi has their hands around their proverbial necks and can seemingly not fail, as every original series they put out does at the very least decently in viewership. But I think they would be ignorant of the past if they think that it is simply enough to pull off something as intense as a show and game tie-in. The game will be a hit or miss, like most games that claim to be massively in multiplayer. For me, I'm confident I will be spending a lot of time in the world that Trion and Sci-Fi have carefully crafted. I look forward excitedly to just how the show and the game will interact. But if you're looking for a game that finally gives you a AAA action game feel with a massive approach, then you may find that Defiance is not what you're looking for, as it tends to cater more to the MMO fan than the shooter fan. Thank you for watching another review here on Nerd Life, and hopefully you've learned a few things to help you decide whether or not Defiance is a game you want to spend $50 on. Please feel free to leave comments on how we can make these reviews better in the future. And if you'd like to see new video types such as gaming news and other things, let us know and we'll take a look at that as well. Until next time, this has been Esh. Play on, players.